So I got this ukulele kit on eBay for $16. Let's take a look at it, put it together, and see how we like it. In this kit we have the pre-made body, the neck. Both the neck and body will need a little bit of sanding, especially around the edges. It has black plastic fretboard, a plastic bridge, gear tuners, a nut and some strings, then also some miscellaneous screws and some tuner ferrules, along with a couple inlay pieces to cover the screws on the bridge. Right off the bat, I'm going to replace the gear tuners with some friction ones. The black will look nice with the bridge and the fretboard. Like I said before, the neck will need a little bit of sanding. It's not too bad, but it'll definitely need a little bit. I think I lucked out with this neck. It has some cool spalting going on. I'll need to sand the body, especially around these edges. There's some leftover material. Also some bumps and bruises that it probably got along the way or at the factory. The first thing that I'm going to do is glue the neck to the body. To save some time at a workshop, you could glue all the necks to the bodies, then you wouldn't have to wait for the glue to dry. The neck is glued on and dried. This would be a great time to stain, paint, Mod Podge, or wood burn this ukulele. If you don't want to do anything like that, you can start putting the parts on now. I was going to leave the wood bare, but because of the spalting, I'm going to put some True Oil on it to see if it brings out the grain. The neck looks pretty cool with that True Oil finish. One thing that's lacking for this ukulele kit are instructions. There are no instructions, so I have to rely on my knowledge for placing the fretboard and bridge. For a lot of sopranos, the 12th fret is where the body meets the neck, and that looks about the same for this too. After I screw on the neck, it'll be easier to see, but the fretboard is not quite wide enough for this neck. I was able to install the neck screws without drilling pilot holes. The neck wood is soft enough for that. Like I mentioned, the neck is slightly wider than the fretboard. It's about 1.5 millimeters too wide on each side. Now it's time for the most critical step, installing the bridge. I'll need to make sure that it's lined up with the fretboard and exactly the right distance from the nut to the saddle. On the fretboard, the distance from the nut to the 12th fret was 6 5/8 inches, which was a little odd. I then measured it in millimeters, and it was 170 millimeters, so I think I'm going to go with that, which works out to a scale length of 13.386 inches, which is a weird length. I pre-drilled the holes for the bridge screws. Thankfully there's a bridge plate underneath it, so the screws have something to grab onto. Even though it has a plastic bridge, it does have a removable saddle. That'll help a lot when I set up this uke. Before I installed the saddle and the nut, I had to trim them down quite a bit. That adds a layer of complexity if you're doing a building workshop. It's time to install the strings. I'm going to use the unbranded strings that came with the kit. I could use some different strings, but a normal set of strings will cost about 1/3 of this entire ukulele. It has strings. Let's take it inside and give it a demo. In the end, I didn't use the strings that came with the kit. I don't consider myself to be a string snob, but these things truly were terrible. They sounded dead and they had a hard time staying in tune. Instead, I put a set of decent strings on it, and now it's sounding better. Have that spalting on the headstock, on the back of the headstock, with those friction tuners that I swapped out. Plastic nut, plastic fretboard that has gold painted frets, plastic bridge with the plastic saddle, a few beauty marks on the back. So let's talk about some of the good things of this kit. First off, the price is nice. It's fairly inexpensive and you get a lot of parts included, even if you want to use the parts for other projects. It's also nice that it doesn't take a whole lot of time to put it together. After you glue on the neck, everything else can be installed pretty quick. Even though I changed the tuners, you could stick with the gear tuners that come with it and have everything you need right in the box. Now let's talk about the things I didn't like that much. First off, there were no instructions. That's going to be a problem for someone that's never done any building before. I also had to trim down the saddle and the nut, and that's going to be a problem for someone that doesn't know how to do that and doesn't know how to set up a ukulele. I already talked about how bad the strings are, so getting some replacement strings is going to be another expense when you're building this ukulele. Some people might be put off by the plastic fretboard and bridge, but at least they're functional. Without further ado, here's how the $16 kit ukulele sounds.